How we doing tonight, New Life Van Buren? Man, I'm excited to be in the house of God. We're here to do some worship. We want you to get along with us tonight. We're going to be talking about fear here in just a little while. So we're going to sing a couple songs here. We want you to worship with us, if you know the words to them. You know what? Do me a favor right now. Stand up wherever you're at. Get you a good little stretch out. Let's stand together here and let's worship God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies until all my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God, and I'm no longer a slave to fear. Yeah, for I am a child of God. In my mother's womb, yeah, you have chosen me, and your love has called my name. See, I've been born again into your family, and your blood flows through my veins. And I'm no longer a slave to fear, yeah, for I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear, for I am a child of God. Oh, 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 you split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. Oh, you rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. For I am a child of God. Oh, I am, for I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. fear. I am a child of God. And I am surrounded by the arms of the Father. And I am surrounded by songs of deliverance. And I am surrounded by the arms of the Father. And I am surrounded by songs of You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. For I am a child of God. Thank you, Lord. This next song here is a new one that I just started doing, and I just want you to focus in right now. Think about the fear that's going around the world right now, the fear that may be in your home, in your personal life, for whatever reason you're dealing with it right now. I want you to understand that any fear that you've got in your life, it has no place, it has no chance when it comes to Jesus Christ. It has no opportunity to take over as long as we're allowing Jesus Christ to take over in our lives. Fear has no chance. When darkness tries to roll over my bones, when sorrow comes to steal the joy I own, when brokenness and pain is all I know, I won't be shaken, I won't be shaken. 'Cause my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Shame no longer has a place to hide. Come on. I am not captive to the lies. I'm not afraid to leave my past behind. No, I won't be shaken. I won't be shaken. 'Cause my fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Yeah. There's power that can break off every chain. Oh, there's power that can empty out the grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. Power in your name. There's power that can break off every chain. Hey. There's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. Power in your name. Come on, there's There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. Power in your name. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Yeah. I'm standing in your love. I'm standing in your love. Standing in your love. There's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power can save. Power in your name. Power in your name. There's power that break off every chain. Yeah. There's power can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. There's power in your name. Yeah. There's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name. Power in your name. Come on, sing it. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Yeah. Standing in your love. Yeah. Amen. Thank you for worshiping with us tonight. We're going to do real quick. We're going to take about a 2-minute break. Go grab you a drink, get comfortable. We're about to get into the Word. I'm excited about it. You can leave, but you got to come right back. Welcome back, guys. Hey, hope you went and got you something to drink because you're going to need it. I know I needed it. I had to get me some water right here. I was a little parched, but hey, we got a second win. We're about to get on with it. I am Red Bull ready to go. I hope you're Red Bull ready to go. Hope you're sitting on your couch, chilling with your family, because that's what this is all about. Let's get closer to each other, closer to God while we have the opportunity to do so. But like I said earlier, tonight we're going to talk about some fear. I know that's something that's real common. A lot of people are talking about this right now. But something really stuck out to me today that I really want to share with you. First of all, we talked a little bit about some of this last week when we talked about Matthew chapter 8. And we talked about the disciples being on the boat with Jesus. Storm got real bad. You know, remember Jesus was sleeping in the back. Storm was so bad the disciples had to figure out, hey, we're just going to have to do something. We're going to have to go get Jesus. So they woke Jesus up. Jesus comes out. And the disciples cry, Lord, save us. That's what they said. And then all of a sudden in verse 26, Jesus comes out. He takes care of business. And then he addresses their lack of faith. And that's one of the things I want to talk to you about tonight. We hear this often. Faith and fear cannot coincide. So what's going on here in Matthew chapter 8 is the disciples are in fear because of what's crazy and what's going on in their life. Does this sound familiar to anybody right now? What you're doing right now, what you're facing, what you're dealing with, it's not familiar, it's not comfortable, and some of us, it's just got us downright afraid. Some of us, we don't know what we're going to do next. We don't know what phone call to expect next. We don't know where to go from here. But I just want you to understand tonight that faith and fear don't coincide. So tonight, we got to fix faith. We're going to have a faith fix tonight. So tonight, after going back over Matthew chapter 8 from last week, I want to do a parallel that's found in Matthew chapter 14. We got another similar situation. But what's going on here in Matthew chapter 14, we're back on a boat. But here's the thing I want you to listen to in Matthew 14. There is wind and there are waves, but there is no storm. See, I've always preached this, that there was another storm brewing. There was another storm going on. But there was wind and there were waves, but it doesn't say anything about a storm. So adversity hits people in different ways. This is what I want to bring this out. This is the reason I brought this out. Some people in America right now, all you're doing is feeling some wind and seeing some waves. But there are other people right now in America who are smack dab in the middle of the storm of their life. There's a lot of crazy things going on in their life that they've never expected to run into. There's things in their life they've never planned for that are going on right now. So what I want you to see is, though there's two different storms here, one of them is just some wind and some waves, and one of them is a downright, full-blown storm. And some of us are in these phases right now of life. What I want you to understand, those of you that are in one or the other, if you're in the phase where there's just some wind and some waves blowing, I want you to understand that this is a warning sign right here. Wind and waves give us a warning sign that there may be something bigger coming. So what I want you to understand, if you're in this phase, don't get relaxed, don't get slack, don't let up on your prayer, don't let up on your time with God. Keep yourself engaged with your relationship with God, and don't be caught by surprise just because you just feel some wind and see some waves. Now, those of you that are in the middle of a storm, I want you to understand on the backside of every storm, the waves start to come down and the wind starts to cease. So if you're one of those in the middle of a crazy storm right now, understand that when this storm begins to go down, you're still going to experience some wind and some waves, but I'm going to get into it a little bit later. It's going to pass. It's going to pass. So the fear in this story in Matthew 14 is different. The fear in this story doesn't come from the waves and the wind. The fear comes from the fact that these guys are out there in the middle of the water, and all of a sudden, there comes a figure walking and standing out in the middle of the water, walking towards them, and they thought it was a ghost. Now, let me be clear. If I'm out on my boat, and all of a sudden, I look out in the water, and some dude is standing in the middle of the water, I'm going to be afraid as well. I'm just being honest with you. If I'm looking out in the middle of the water and I see something and first of all, I'll check myself. But then if I check my buddy and he sees it as well, I know I'm in trouble. So all of a sudden, the disciples were all on the same page right here. Hey, there is something out there and it looks like a ghost. So this is what's interesting. Jesus comes in and he starts to tell them, hey, it's me. He tells them in a lot of different ways, hey, it's me. But this is what Peter does. Peter says, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you, walking on the water. So we all know Peter gets out and he starts to sink. He sees the wind. He gets afraid. He cries out, Lord, save me. Notice this is similar to the terminology in Matthew 8 where they cried out again, Jesus, come save us. So in other words, we've got two different storms here, two different magnitudes, but the result of both is crying, Jesus, come save us. Jesus, take care of us. So we all know Peter starts to sink, right? Well, Jesus comes, gets a hold of him, and this time, rather than talking to everyone, Jesus talks to Peter and says, one of little faith, why are you doubting me? Jesus grabs a hold of Peter right here, just Peter, and says, why did you doubt me? So I'm looking at this, and the only one that stepped out of the boat is the one getting ridiculed here. So I'm like, man, that's tough. The only one that steps out is getting ridiculed. But here's the thing. The disciples' fear in this story, in Matthew chapter 14 versus chapter 8, the fear is more justified because in this story, Jesus was not present on the boat with them. In the story of chapter 8, Jesus is up there chilling with them. I'm not really 100% sure why the fear was present. But in this one, it makes a little more sense to them. But this is beyond anything they've ever seen. They see this figure and they don't know what it is. They think it's a ghost. And the main difference of this story is obviously Peter says, Jesus, identify yourself and allow me to come to you. That's a lot of the difference here. But here's the issue. I want you to think about this. I've seen my whole life, I've seen this story, but I haven't thought about it in this way. The issue here is that most people commend Peter for stepping out of the boat, but I would like to challenge that ideology for a moment, and here's why. Jesus has clearly identified himself by telling the disciples to take heart. He says this in this chapter. He also has said this in chapter 9, verses 2 and 22, and the people did. So he's already familiar with this take heart. So they've heard this before. They've seen it before. Then he declares, I am, which has this divine overtones. He's already saying, listen, take heart, I am. Then he says, don't be afraid, which he regularly declares in Matthew chapter 10, verse 26, verse 28, 31, chapter 17, verse 7, and chapter 28, verse 10. Jesus declared, don't be afraid. Here's the problem. Jesus did all this stuff, and he said all these things to show them that I am who I'm telling you that I am. This is me. This is the real Jesus. The problem is, after this, Peter decides to challenge this terminology, and the problem is this is the same terminology that was used by Satan in Matthew chapter 4, verse 3, and Satan looks at Jesus and says, hey, if you are the Son of God, tell the stones to become loaves. In Matthew chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, it says the devil took him to the city of Jerusalem, to the highest point of the temple, and said, if you are the Son of God, jump off. And then we look at the mockers at the cross in Matthew 27 and 40, and they said, if you are the Son of God, save yourself and come down from the cross. Why does that even matter? Why does it matter that Peter asked these questions before getting out? Didn't he get out? He did. But this matters because I want you to understand something. Even though Jesus had already proven himself to be who he said he was, Peter still had the nerve to say, if it's you, tell me to come. He doubted and questioned that Jesus was who he said he was. So in the middle of the wind and the high waves, Peter was not confident that Jesus was who he said he was. So I had to ask myself this question. I wonder if Peter was defeated before he ever set foot off of that boat. I had to ask myself, I wonder if Peter's battle was gone and over and lost before he stepped out. Peter physically stepped out of the boat, but did he mentally step out of the boat? Did he spiritually step out of the boat? Verse 31 says, Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him, and this is what he said, you have so little faith, why did you doubt me? So I'm here to challenge those of you watching this tonight. Don't get caught up in what's going on in the world and get so overwhelmed that when all this is said and done and Jesus rescues us because he's going to, he's got a plan. Don't be one of those that after this is all said and done, Jesus looks at you and says, why do you have such little faith?
Why did you doubt me? I've proven and I've told you over and over again that I am who I say I am. Fear is a mind game that makes us question if Jesus is who he says he is and if he's there. That's what fear does. So I'm going to be open and honest with you. This is a very embarrassing story. I've told this to New Life before, but I want to tell everybody. When I was a little kid, I used to love going and staying with my friends during the daytime. I would hang out with them all day. We would play all night. We would rock it out. But when it was time to go to bed, little John had problems. When it was time to go to bed, little John had anxiety. Little John started to have, well, I was never little. Pardon me, that's not accurate. Big little John, had problems when it was time to go to bed. I was good all day, good all night playing, but when it's time to shut down and go to bed, no matter what time of the night it was, my parents always got a phone call. And they would have to come pick me up. And every time this happened, the very next morning, I would wake up feeling like an absolute loser. I'm like, man, my friends are going to think I'm so lame, and they probably did. The parents are probably sitting at home saying, that kid's never coming back to our house again. He's a little whiner. He can't. And they were accurate. They're not wrong to say that. But I'm looking at this, and every single time I had to do this. So what would happen is I would always experience anxiety because I would play this what-if game. What if this happens? What if something happens to my family and I'm not there? What if this? What if that? And this anxiety started to build up because of what if. So what if they don't like me? What if I lose my job? What if we break up? What if this happens? What if? That's the game we play in our minds right now. And what that does is it's a breeding ground for us to get into some things that we don't need to be in. That's a breeding ground for our fear to strike. But 2 Timothy 1:7 tells us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind. A sound mind is essential to living a prosperous life because right thinking leads to correct living. The heart refers to our emotions and feelings, whereas the mind refers to our thoughts, imaginations, comprehension, and logical reasoning. Having a sound mind is important because we move, we make decisions, and we act accordingly to the perception and comprehension of our mind. That's why having a sound mind is so important. The decisions that you make right now in your life have everything to do with your mindset and where your mind is at. Here's the thing about fear and anxiety. They're both very similar, but there is a difference. It's not in the emotion itself, it's in the response. It's in what these two things are responding to. Fear is a response to an immediate, whether it's real or perceived, threat. It's like standing in the middle of a street and seeing a bus coming at you. Fear strikes when I'm in the middle of the road and I see a bus. That's coming. That's real. Anxiety appears not in the face of an immediate threat, but in the anticipation of something that will or might happen. So fear strikes when I'm in the middle of a real deal. Anxiety is when I create these things in my mind that may happen, that could happen. So this is what happens when we stand at the edge of a street and look both ways because a bus could drive by. So I'm going to stand here and not move because something might come. That's what anxiety does to us. In general, fear is a response to an immediate known threat. Anxiety is a response to a possibility. Physiologically, fear and anxiety, they look very similar. But both give rise to the physical response commonly known as fight or flight. Some of you have heard this before. Both can encourage us to get out of the middle of the street. Both can help us in the short term, but in the long term, fear and anxiety are not a place we want to camp out. Fear is something that can help us. Anxiety is something that can help us in its original context. But when we allow it to camp out in our lives and take over, that's when it gets into a problem. Worry enters the picture when we choose to stay in a place of unease. So the longer I stay in fear, the longer I stay in this level of anxiety, that's when worry starts to set in. Unlike normal anxiety, worry is not an involuntary physical response. It's a pattern that we choose to indulge in. It rises not from the outside, but from within. Whether or not we are conscious of it, worry is an action. It's a choice that we make to stay in that place of anxiety that was designed to protect us from immediate danger, not to see us through everyday life. We make that decision. Do I allow it to help me and allow it to assist me to stay out of dangerous situations, or do I live in it? We have a decision to make. People who choose to worry rather than trust God are engaging in a rejection that He offers us. So changing this habit begins with changing what we believe about God. Voluntary worry ultimately cannot be overcome with itself. Its solution is rooted entirely in who God is. My worry cannot just take care of itself. The solution to me worrying and being concerned about the crazy stuff in life all rests in who God is. It's rooted in what we choose to believe. How many of you have ever encountered a stray animal at your house? Come on. Party over here, party over there. Think about it. Have you ever encountered a stray animal at your house? What is the absolute worst thing you can do to a stray animal? Feed it. Worry is a stray animal that is attached to your life. When worry decides to come in and set in, the worst thing I can do is start feeding it. If I start feeding it, guess what it's going to do? It's going to come back, and it's going to come back, and it's going to come back. And then it's going to think, this is my home. I'm here to stay. John 10:10 says, "A thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the fullest." The reason the enemy wants us to live in worry and fear is because he knows that when God's people are free from fear, they walk in power, authority, and victory. Worry will steal your joy. It will kill your motivation. It will destroy your destiny if you allow it to. Here's what I want you to understand. Whatever you're going through right now, it will pass. It's temporal. When we view our surroundings based upon our own vision, we remove God from the process. It's not about what I see, it's about what He sees. 2 Corinthians 5:7 says this, we walk by faith and what? Not by sight. When we live in constant anxiety or fear or worry, these issues lead to a condition that is quite common that you may have heard of before. It's called depression. When you allow these things to take over in your life, they lead to a really, really serious problem called depression. I am not one to knock depression and say that it's not real. I'm here to tell you that depression comes in when we allow all these other things to take over in our lives. Depression literally depresses, shocker, the effects of negative thinking by numbing us out to fear. Now, that seems as though it might be a good thing, right? But the problem is depression is not selective. Depression does not choose to just pull the bad stuff and leave the good stuff. Depression depresses the emotions and the feelings that we have. We can become numb to things like joy and love when all this decides to set in. It doesn't just pick the bad stuff. Maybe you've blamed depression for your negative thinking. But I want you to understand that it's the other way around. Your negative thinking is the cause of your depression. It's not the other way. So whatever's going on in your life, however low and however attacked you feel right now by what's going on in the world, understand that the more you think negatively, the more you dwell, the more you allow yourself to soak in this stuff, the quicker these things set in. Here's good news. This means that by correcting improper thinking, I can pull myself out of this low that I'm in. And in order to wake up from this, I have to overcome my fear-based thinking that's created this problem for me. Numbers 13 and 14, Israel was standing at the edge of the promised land, in the midst of the wilderness. They should have been at the foot, entering the land that God had given them for their inheritance. And in order to encourage their faith, God allowed Moses to send 12 spies to look over at the land and to see if what God had said was true. So just to ease their mind, God said, all right, send 12. When they came back, there were 10 that only talked about all the giants. They were afraid, saying that we were like grasshoppers in their eyes. We were tiny in their eyes. Everything that they said when they came back was negative. 10 of the 12. Even though God had promised them all this stuff. But there were 2. that came back and they were shouting. They were carrying huge grapes and jugs of milk and buckets of honey, singing, "We are able to go up and take the land." Only 2 of 12 saw this thing from this perspective. They saw the same giants as everybody else, but they had a faith report rise up. They were convinced that God's word was true and that He was who He said He was. They didn't have to say, "God, if this is you, do this." They knew. When the people heard about the giants, they all became fearful. The narrative of the giants got so exaggerated. Their thinking, it destroyed the faith of God's people. Anxiety causes us to exaggerate how bad our situation really is. That's what happens. But God has not given us a spirit of fear. Fear will cause us to ignore God's power. Fear will cause us to walk by our sight. The Lord's report is to walk with a sound mind. Evil reports drown out faith, but we don't need to believe those reports. Listen to what the response of the righteous says. The Bible says the righteous shall be as bold as a lion. I'm not going to sit back and patty cake with this anymore. I'm going to get serious with it. Bold as a lion. So Caleb stood up in Numbers 13 and 30 and says, "Let's go up at once, take possession, for we are well able to take it." Caleb ignored the evil report and believed what God had said. I'm here to tell you guys, if you don't understand by now that God is still in control, He's still on the throne, He is still sitting at the right hand of God the Father, interceding for you and I every single day. If you don't believe that report, that's why you're upset. That's why you're depressed. That's why you're not happy right now. So how do I overcome this? Fear, anxiety, worry, depression. The short answer is change your thinking. But that's not an instruction, that's a solution. So how do I change my thinking? In Mark 9, Jesus approaches a crowd of people. They're arguing. Everything's crazy. What's going on? Jesus said, "What is all this arguing about?" A man stepped up and said, "My son is possessed with an evil spirit. I brought him to your disciples to have the spirit cast out, but they couldn't do it." Jesus then looks at him and says, "You faithless people, how long do I have to babysit you and do your work for you? Bring me that boy." Jesus is calling the church right now to be this faith, to be this generation where things are going wrong and we step in and we do what God's empowered us to do. We don't have to wait on Jesus Himself to come take care of it. He's given us power. He's given us power. But He says, "Oh, you faithless people, how long do I have to do this?" This is what the boy's dad said. And listen to this. The boy's dad said, "Jesus, please heal him if you can." Now, I'm imagining Jesus at this point. And He said, "Hold on. Can you repeat that? My ears must be stopped up. Did you just say, 'if I can'?" Because He says, "What do you mean, if I can?" And then He says this, "All things are possible to those who believe." And then the father cried out and said, "I do believe, but help my unbelief." And I've heard this a million times, but I looked this up. The word unbelief comes from the Greek word apisteia, which the etymology of this word is apistos, which means faithless, and it also means to not be trusted. So this dad looked at Jesus and said, "I believe, but help me fix the areas where you can't trust me." Man, that's a prayer right there. That's a prayer to have every day right now. God, I believe that you're the God who you say you are. I believe you're in control and you have a plan. But help me right now fix these areas, God, where I'm not trustworthy. Help me fix these areas where you can't trust me to go, where you can't trust me to be the one that's sent. Fix this in me, God. Jesus cast out the spirit, and the disciples said, "Hey, why couldn't we cast that out, Jesus?" Jesus said, "These things come only by prayer and fasting." So I've got a challenge for you. When you feel anxiety trying to rise in your life, stop, pray. When you feel fear trying to grip your heart, regardless of what's going on, stop, pray. When worry overwhelms you, stop, pray. If some of you prayed as much as you complained, I'm not going to have to finish that sentence. If we prayed as much as we complained sometimes, the power is there. Listen to this amplified version of the scripture. 1 John 4:18. "There is no fear in love. Dread does not exist. But full-grown, complete, perfect love turns fear out the door and expels every trace of terror. Man, that's fantastic. That version is amazing. Full-grown, complete, perfect love turns fear out the door and expels every trace of terror. I love this. It's that my fear does not stand a chance when it comes to the perfect love of Jesus. And I want to close with this tonight. In both Matthew 8 and 14, Jesus ends up on the boat. This is significant because a ship was one of the earliest symbols of Christianity, and these stories indicate why it's so attractive. So I want to declare to the church tonight, as we're fixing to pray, I want to declare to the church tonight, when surrounded by adversity, safety, and salvation are experienced as long as Christ is in the boat. Both scenarios, whether it's a raging storm or just some wind and some waves, when fear begins to strike and grip, safety and salvation always come as long as we allow Jesus Christ to stay in the boat with us. God, I thank you for this day. I thank you for each and every person that's listening tonight. God, I'm so stirred by what you're doing right now. God, I'm seeing people on these leadership forums that are flooding together and saying, hey, what are you doing right now? What can we do right now? How can we reach more people? How can we be more effective? And I'm seeing a band and a body pull together like I've never seen before. God, I pray right now that those that are watching tonight, listening tonight, if the fear, the worry, and the anxiety of what's going on right now in the world is trying to pull them down, I pray right now, Lord, that you remind them that you are who you say you are. I pray right now that each and every individual that is listening to this live feed tonight, God, I pray that they would be encouraged to move forward and to remember that the church is going to prosper. The church will prosper. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. Guys, I want to thank you again for joining us tonight. I want to remind you once again, this coming Sunday, we're going to be live at 10:30 a.m. on Facebook Live, also within our New Life Van Buren app. If you want to go into our app and send in prayer requests, if you want to go in our app and send us some of your testimonies, your praise reports, please do that. If you want to go through our app and give, if the church has been beneficial to you and it's been a lighthouse for you, then there's an option to give in there as well. There's also a text to give option. You can go through our Facebook feeds and see that. But guys, we just want to thank you right now. Everyone that supports this church, we are just so grateful for it. We're so grateful for you. Those of you that watch every week, we're grateful for you as well. And I pray right now that each and every one of you that are under the sound of this voice, that you would leave this live feed tonight and have peace in your life and be blessed and be prosperous in the weeks to come. God bless you. Thank you again for watching New Life Van Buren Live. We'll see you Sunday morning at 10:30.